Once again, as always, great to see you, Dr. Jeff. I hope things are going well.
Pleasure to be here. Yes, they are going far better. Thank you.
Good, good. We were just talking about the fact that you're headed to Banff on November 3rd. You're staying at the Springs Hotel. Oh, and of course, you're doing, preparedness conference. What a great location for a preparedness
Well,
conference.
this is the thing. And the first time that I saw it, it's actually restarted last year, and I went last year as well. It's called Disaster Forum, and it's sponsored by an environmental company out of Calgary called Trace Associates. And what they wanted to do is it was ongoing and then got sidelined by the pandemic, like so many gathering and organizational things did. But what it represents is it's a regional conference for people in the disaster space in Western Canada. So if you think it's really just constant, there's only about 110, 115 delegates to the entire conference.
Oh, wow.
Very intimate, very small, very targeted neighborhood, very
Hmm.
targeted group of people.
Hmm.
I really prefer going to those because number one, you can network with everybody there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
when you come back a second time, you'll remember consistently a number of the faces that you
yeah,
saw there,
yeah,
contrasting to the Ottawa conference I went to last month, where there was just over 2,000 registered delegates at the
yeah,
conference.
yeah.
But I said to Daryl, the head of Trace Associates, that you do realize I continue to pay to sponsor and come back because of your location.
Yeah.
Like, this is a great gathering and I might be interested. But the hook that had me from the beginning was
Yeah,
we're going to be at the Banff Springs Hotel.
yeah,
Now, it is literally the premier place to be in Banff,
yeah,
which is a bougie place to be on its start if you want to stay in the town. But the reason we get to stay at the Banff Springs, and this is totally intentional, is end October, very early November is the shoulder season.
that's right.
So the golfers and the summer trail folks are gone,
Yep.
and the winter skiers and cross country people aren't there yet. So there's a very small window where a gathering of this type with the kind of cost structure they have would be able to get into the Banff Springs Hotel. I
Yeah.
mean, the hotel rooms there on a cheap day are $800 a night plus.
Boy, I know.
And there's suites for 36, 5,000, $5,500 a night. And we're getting in there for a well less than 50% of that for the conference rate. And so my wife comes with me because it's just a magical place to be. We tack a couple of days, a day or two on either end of the trip. But we're really talking about, and this year's topical because we saw what happened in Jasper early this year,
Yes,
which is 2 hours up the valley
that's
uh,
right.
from Banff, and Banff faces a number of the very same conditions and circumstances that existed in Jasper and led to the fire. So, when we're talking about what does Western Canada face that's different from everybody else? What are
Mhm.
the considerations? And because this is a great example of the cultural differences of this country,
Yes.
because the frame of personal responsibility in Western Canada looks significantly different than my experience going to similar conferences in downtown Toronto.
Hmm.
And what I saw a month or so ago here in Ottawa was the people in Western Canada just have a cultural ideology that leans towards they accept responsibility for their outcomes.
Hmm. Hmm.
They want the latest knowledge, skills, and intelligence about it. They get love to have some guidance on what strategies they could use.
Yeah.
Then they literally want you to get out of their way and
Yes.
let them get after it.
Yep.
It's very much a do with you idea.
Yes.
It's not a do it yourself. They want participation, they want skills, they want knowledge, but it's a do it with you.
Yeah.
Whereas very much what I found here in, let's call it central Canada, being a good East Coaster, I can't call it Eastern. It's very much a do it for you frame where They want to be in the room, they want to participate in everything, but the end result, what they're looking for is a policy or a programmatic intervention from an agency to implement all of these great ideas. Where the
Mm-hmm.
folks in Western Canada are like, these are great ideas. I love them. Get out of my way so that I can implement them.
Yeah.
And I'm not arguing whether one is better than the other. This is why I like going to the regional gatherings,
Yeah.
because there's really no such thing as a national view,
Yeah. No.
especially in a country as diverse
Yes.
geographically and culturally as we have in Canada. There is no national view on this stuff. There's always going to be a series of regional views.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's in the Banff Springs Hotel. And I
Well,
have to mention my absolute favorite location of the Rundle Bar, which if you've never been to Banff, it's a 2-story bar with a massive big bookshelf and bar, and they serve high tea up in the upper level during the day.
yes.
And the atmosphere, I mean, these old railway baron buildings that have been built 100 plus years ago are perfect examples of where the who's who used to cluster and gather. So it's
Mm.
one, I mean, the architecture in Canada is not that old, but when you sit down and you sit in the Rundle Bar, you often, or I often think about who else has sat and contemplated small
Right.
and big decisions
That's right.
in such an environment.
Yes.
You know, how many prime ministers, how many
Right.
presidents, how many,
Yep. Yep.
you know, top people in business have been in this environment and made
Yep.
critical decisions. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I found, especially the last conference, is that it brings out the best in discussion and discourse. I had some pretty great back and forths on several issues with some pretty really interesting, powerful people sitting in that room. And I can't wait to get back. I mean,
Hey,
it's incredible.
obviously, the enthusiasm comes
Oh,
across. It's fascinating. You touched on a whole bunch of things, especially with somebody like me who's actually been in and out of Banff many, many times. Never mind other parts of Canada. Actually, I've been in every single major city in Canada from coast to coast. And so I have probably one of the I am probably one of the few people who has a sense of the cultural differences that exist in Canada because I actually experienced it going from coast to coast. And even within a province, how certain cities are different. No, not certain. All the cities are different. So you go to Alberta, Edmonton is not the same as Calgary. And Calgary is not only not the same as Edmonton, but it's not the same as Regina. It's not the same, and Regina is not the same as Saskatoon. And I can go on and on and
yeah.
on about this. Even Brandon, Manitoba is different from Winnipeg when you get right down to it. And that, let's not even talk about Ontario, which actually has more variety than people like to admit. And one of the discussions I had during our session this week was with somebody who lives in Barrie. So he commuted every day to come down here for our 5-day session. And he's a Brit, he's English, Lee, and he works for the health network here in downtown Toronto. So he's in the city for work. He lives up in Barrie, and he is looking to go up to Northern Ontario to get away from people, as he put it. And I don't blame him. I don't blame him. And we got into this incredible discussion of when you get farther north, you go to places like Timmins and Cochrane and so on and so forth, you run into something that's very odd. You would think, and this is our misunderstanding, you would think that life would be, the life standard of life would be cheaper. Okay, on the one hand, the farther away you get from big cities, the more expensive the food becomes. All right, that's one version. The other is you'd think that, things like property tax would be reduced. After all, you're out in the country. He said, no, certain cities, certain regions because of the heavy focus on mining and the infrastructure needed to maintain the mining communities, the property tax base is like just as bad as Toronto, if not worse.
Yep.
Because it becomes worse because you have fewer domicile situations where you can tap into the tax base. And he was shocked by that. He said, in this district, it's like $168, or I have property in Manitoulin and it's like nothing. And it's waterfront property. And I have practically nothing. But I go to Cochrane and it's some outrageous, four-figure amount in annual tax for a small piece of land.
Yeah.
He said, so when you think about regions, one of the things we all have to recognize is not only do we not have a national view about many things, including the economy, it isn't east to west in terms of what is the national identity. Even within provinces, even within regions, there's such disparity.
Yeah.
Along with all and we're going to use the term, expectation and the concomitants of responsibility. All right. Because the question I asked him is, why in this district are they charging so much money for property tax? What is it? Where's the money being used?
Yep.
He said, nobody has any clarity on it. I went, oh, okay, that to me is a problem right there. Right? Where does this money go? All right, you don't have a city, you don't have you have a regional government, you have reeves. Okay, these are volunteer, elected positions. This isn't someone who's walking away with a six-figure or even 12-figure, whatever the hell it is, a salary. This is someone who's got, a pittance in order to, do their volunteer work. So where is all this money going, and what is it being used for? Is it there's a part of me that doesn't want to scratch too much below, beneath the surface to find that out. And so you get to a place like Banff, and you get to the Banff Springs Hotel, which I will say is one of my favorite hotels that I have never stayed in, because it's impossible to stay in from a financial point of view unless you're just tons of money, right? But what I enjoy about it is just walking in. You get a slice of Canadian history that does not exist in any of the other railway hotels across the country, right? The Chateau Laurier is a city hotel. The Banff Springs Hotel is a country hotel built like a castle made of stone. The stone alone stops you dead in your tracks.
Oh, and you're exactly right. But to amplify what you just said, like when you go in the front door, there's a big stairway there. At the top of the stairwell is a historical presentation of the hotel in the area. So right away, they intentionally placed the history and the pictures and stories and everything about where this came to be right there at the beginning. And obviously, you're in a higher end location, frequented by a population who makes an income far exceeding mine.
Never mind. Yeah,
I was in the regular entrance. They even on the side, they have a gold club.
Yes, I know.
Reception. That gold club also has its own floors.
Yeah.
It also has its own restaurant and bar.
Yep.
So you can mingle amongst those who are part of the club that you're with.
That's right.
But that aside, one thing that had happened to me, and I'm not in that crowd, I felt like I belonged in that crowd by the way the people there treat you.
Yes.
And by the way the staff.
Yes.
My concern to the concierge standing there in a sweatshirt was just as important, or I was made to feel like it was just as important.
Precisely.
As the family that left ahead
Yep.
where the father of the family was wearing a Chanel outfit,
Yes.
and the jacket itself was probably $8 or $9,000.
Yep.
And I was behind him in a sweatshirt, and I was treated. It's part of the mystique of the place, and I
Yes.
think that historical reference we miss a lot in our culture. We miss a lot in our culture across this nation.
Yeah. Yeah. Two words came to mind as you were talking. First of all, just thinking of the place. Now it's in my mind, and I got to go home after 5 days of teaching and just say, "Wow, I wish I were going to Banff right now." It's baronial. There, this is where you almost see the royal family
Yeah.
hanging out to have tea. And I mean hanging out. This is like low end, we're going to sit
Yeah.
down, put our feet up, and, oh, darling, give me my tea. The other is there's a sense of pride. We just did our leadership program, and that's what I talked about. How proud are you to work in the company you work in,
Yep.
so that you would go and demonstrate that pride, not just tell the world, I work for this. The people's behavior, the behavior of the people that you interact with at a place like Banff is an expression of their pride being there. Right?
Yep.
And that pride moves into an entire sense of responsibility. I am here to be responsible for your use of this place. Now,
Yep.
notice I said use. I didn't say enjoyment necessarily.
Use.
You're using this place. You're staying. By the way, it's a hotel. This is where you're going to put your head down and sleep. Right? That's what you do in a hotel. But there is a level of pride in the entire organization, or the entire building. It just
Yeah.
exudes pride that you just say, ah, it's not that I have arrived. It's not necessarily ego. It's a case of gratitude, because there are people who are going to be act as if I were the most important person in the room,
Yep.
despite the fact I am wearing, dirty jeans, because my cowboy kids, would show up with me at that place, and they've just come off of the ranch,
Yep.
wearing their boots and their jeans and their whatever. They got their cowboy hats on. I love them dearly just for being Albertan cowboys. There's
Yep.
no pretension here.
No.
And insofar as I have any massive respect for people in Alberta, it's those people I have respect for. I'm going to be blunt. Calgary is not my favorite city. I don't particularly like Calgary. Great restaurants, though. I think I've said this before. Um, um, the Palliser is special. No two ways about it. But my favorite city in Alberta is Edmonton. And I know there are Albertans that look at me saying, what the hell is your problem? Right, that's a lunch bucket, kind of town.
Government town.
And then there's government to make it even worse.
Yeah.
Right? You've got oil refineries and so on and so forth. It's got the valley of valleys. You sit out on the patio of the McDonald Hotel, which is my actual favorite hotel to stay in, and you watch the entire world in the valley do its thing as the sun goes down, and you go, okay, now it's time for my single malts and my cigar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's about enjoying the environment with
Yes.
those, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I agree with you. I can have a cigar, a single malt. I might actually tonight, anyhow. Um, Anywhere, but there's an environment where it
Yeah.
just brings out
Yep.
so much of that excitement, and it's I just think it's there's a lot of these really cool cultural icons that exist in this country that we don't champion enough. We don't
Yeah.
send enough people
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
People look at downtown Toronto, blah, downtown Montreal, blah, and this is Canada. No, not
No,
at
it's
all.
not
Like
Canada.
this is not our country. It
No.
happened. It's it's like you and I both live in the province of Ontario. I live in the second largest city. You live in the largest city. And guess what? We occupy such a minute
Oh,
portion of the geographical area.
like this.
Like I live in Ottawa. I'm speaking at an event in Dryden in April. That is a 19 and a half hour drive west of my home, and I am still in the province of Ontario.
Yes, I know. I've
And
I've flown around Ontario. Yes.
like literally, so I'm kind of I've never done that drive. So part of me wants to just rent a car and do the drive. But the North
Yeah.
Shore of Lake Superior at the first week of April might not be the actual type of driving I'm looking for.
Mm.
But people tell me it's far better to do that drive in the summer.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but it's either that or
Yeah, you're
it's
liable to run into ice and snow in April, in that part of the world.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, but
Yeah.
it's just so many of these icons exist in our country. And this is where I'm looking forward to. My wife and I have been planning for years. And again, setting aside the nickels, we've got an opportunity to take the Canadian train ride
Oh,
out
oh,
of leaving from Toronto,
yeah, yeah,
going to Vancouver.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So this is something we've wanted for a long
yeah,
time. It's
yeah,
been on our bucket list.
yeah,
We've been putting away our toonies and loonies for a
yeah,
significant period of time,
yeah.
and we've booked the trip, and we're getting to go in February through the Rockies.
Ooh, ooh.
I can't afford to go in the summer. It's
No.
it's too expensive, and it's difficult to get a ticket in the summer.
But I know we're talking about how much fun we have traveling around Canada,
Yeah.
and one would ask, could potentially ask the question, what does this have to do with preparedness? One of the fundamental, I don't know, baselines, if you will, is, and you mentioned it in your blog this morning, we have lost a sense of responsibility. And so that got me to think, and I'm glad we're talking in this way, got me to think, okay, how does one rebuild a sense of responsibility? Traveling.
Hmm.
If you want to, we think of responsibility of the things I have to do in order to be prepared. Yes, you do. But responsibility is a cultural, contextual situation, right? It's not about crossing the country to learn about how people are preparing for exogenous situations. It's about crossing the country to learn about the country,
Yeah. Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
to recognize what we've been saying all along, there's no such thing as a national view.
No.
It's not necessarily bad that we don't have an omnibus national view that covers absolutely everything at all times, but it's actually more important to realize that the fact that we don't have a national view is potentially a benefit when it
Yeah.
comes to recognizing what can be done, what might be done, what could be done. Notice I'm avoiding the, should be done. Okay. When we think of responsibility, we often enough think of the shoulds. This is what I should do.
The
I
conditionals.
have
Yeah.
to do this, right? And we condition ourselves in that way. When if we were to open ourselves to explore, and in particular explore differences, we might actually learn more about what we're capable of doing. It's about that skill set,
Yeah.
capability, than anything else. Because your Venn diagram, which you did not draw in your blog, is at the very core of preparedness is responsibility, skills, and duty. All right, if we were to put those three together as three circles that interlined in a Venn diagram, in the middle is preparedness. Responsibility is the foundation. Skills are the scalable things. And how do we scale? We scale and we learn by exploring. We
Yeah,
could read all the frickin' documents in the universe,
I know.
okay? We could read every single book that we want to. Um, Bluntly, folks, skills are about what we can do, not about what we think we can do. And how do we actually encounter that opportunity to look at and learn what we're capable of doing as human beings, as individuals, never mind as collectives, is go discover it.
It is, and so much of it is going to be different. Where it's location dependent. Different hazards exist across the country.
Exactly.
The capabilities that you're going to need to possess to be successful in the city of Toronto are going to look different than somebody in Cochrane, Ontario. It's going to
Yes.
look different than
Yes.
somebody on Fogo Island in Newfoundland,
Yes.
in Banff National Park, etc. So the conversation we try to have nationally is the idea behind the preparedness conversation is that you acknowledge your responsibility to learn what it is that I need to be capable of doing,
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
skills that I need to be aware of to fill
Mm-hmm.
that capability gap,
Mm-hmm.
and then figuring out a way to learn it. But that skill set requirement is really going to be culturally and significantly different
Exactly.
as we go around the country.
Exactly.
So this is why I when I speak to people, I said, okay, what is an appropriate preparedness standard for Northern Ontario is going to look different from one that's good for Windsor, Ontario.
Exactly.
The outset is being responsible for your own outcomes, and the broad spectrum at the top is likely similar, but how we get there, and this is very similar to the concept that we did that is the grounding of military operations in NATO and in the global north. And it's based on the idea of mission command. And mission command is the idea that I'm going to tell you what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
You are empowered,
Mm-hmm. To figure out how to do it.
empowered to figure out the how.
Yeah.
What I must never do is
Yeah.
tell you what to do
Right.
and tell you how to do it.
Right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
so, with that, you empower people to learn, you empower
Yeah.
people to become
Yeah.
creative, you
Yeah.
empower people to understand the environment they're in, and to make intelligent choices based upon
Yeah.
the set of variables that they're exposed to that others are not going to be
Yeah.
exposed to. So,
Yeah.
I grew up on the East Coast of Nova Scotia. I needed a different set of skill sets that I need here in Ottawa and that I need when I travel to northern Saskatchewan to go canoeing. Those are all different set. But the duty, and I loved how you used that word, the duty that's underlying it, it's often, and I think you and I actually had this discussion a couple of episodes, like many episodes ago, about the fact that everybody wants the positive outcome, but they don't want the duty that's associated with,
No. No. No.
right? So I have a duty to myself, fair enough. I
Yeah.
have an immediate group of people for whom I'm
Yep.
responsible.
Yep.
But I argue, and I was trying to argue in that piece, that you also have a duty to the community in which you belong.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
have a duty and responsibility to the community and the collective where you've chosen to live to do things responsibly and contribute to the organization. I often say that this is one of the things, and this extends to public health, which is often kind of correlated to in some cases to emergency management and the greater health outcome,
Mm-hmm.
is if we have a healthcare system in Canada that is funded by taxpayer but free to use. So I say funded but not free. But it's
No.
free to access, but it's funded by taxpayers.
Right. Right.
What we don't talk about in this country is the duty for individuals and the responsibility to
Mm-hmm.
take care of themselves as
Mm-hmm.
part of their duty to the greater collective.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk to businesses and when I talk to municipalities and when I talk to groups, I'm like, you have a duty to be prepared
Yes,
so that you draw less of the finite resources that are
yes,
available to the
yes,
government in times of crisis.
yeah, yeah,
We want to reduce the demand
yeah,
on the finite, limited public sector
right,
resources so that
right,
they can do the really important work and they're not chasing me around for something that I could have addressed
yeah,
independently.
yeah. When we think of our current cultural what I want to say, esprit, to use a totally strange word, it really is self-absorbed. We generally are self-absorbed, and you can tell. And I'm not pointing fingers at young people or whoever. I mean, it's about how much money do I have? How many? I'm an influencer because I have so many followers on social media, and I am now going to make millions of dollars because now the advertising world, which has got its own fangs out, are going to use me in order to advertise their hangnail solution, and so on and so forth, with being totally facetious about it. And so what I find fascinating about all that, and it is reality, it's all around us. We can whine, bitch, and moan all about it we want, but that's the way it is. And it's exacerbated because of something like this. I mean, I really don't have to talk to you.
Yep.
When was the last time that anybody actually used this as a real phone? Very rarely, very, very rarely. I mean, we communicate in ways that are so arm's length that the whole notion of community has been, I don't think, lost so much as redefined as through here. This is
Redefine, yeah.
my community.
Yeah.
Now, this is a community I don't need to deal with face to face, because dealing face to face is messy. All right. It's like going to Thanksgiving dinner with your family and being there with the aunts and uncles you don't like.
Yeah.
We can avoid that. I can go and have a good time with a bunch of people that I've never met, and I don't have to get dirt under my fingernails doing it. Right?
Yep.
It's down to that point. And when you get a whole generation of people who are germaphobes to begin with, now I'm really getting silly here, and they're constantly using Purell in order to, before they even think about going to the washroom, never mind going to, eat. This sanitization of community is real. It becomes an entire value system. This is a sanitized approach to community that doesn't mean I have to do the messy things. Okay, and it somewhat reminds me of Maggie Smith's quote or statement in Downton Abbey, where she looked at her nephew and said, "What's a weekend?" Right? I don't need to know that stuff. I can actually be totally out of the loop and not even know what day of the week it is. Right?
Well, exactly. And
Right.
we don't have any consequences in the 2D world.
No, no.
Because
So
when you and I are present to each other and we're looking at each other,
yeah,
body language speaks far more than the verbal
totally,
sound.
totally.
And if I say something that intentionally or otherwise comes across in a certain way, there's no consequences here where I'm sitting
No,
right now.
no, 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 no,
But if
no.
I'm in the physical presence of somebody
Yeah, yeah,
who could get right up uncomfortably in my
that's right.
personal space and challenge me on what I
In your
say,
face, as they say.
right, I can avoid it by doing this.
Yes, yes. And so what I find fascinating about all this is it isn't so much the breakdown of community and a communitarian point of view as a repositioning of any sense of community in a distance mode,
Yeah.
in a non face-to-face, non-physical mode. Still community, all right? Any sociologist would say, yes, we still have a community. Anybody who's doing studies, doing your master's on, the impact of social media, one of the things is you cannot deny that there's a communitarian approach to this. It's not the community that we grew up in.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, then it becomes difficult for us to begin to understand the distinction between a shareholder and a stakeholder. Now, that sounds like business language, but in a community, even in a non-business community, there are shareholders. Even more than that, there are stakeholders. Shareholders have monetary reasons for being there. Stakeholders are everybody who's there because they're part of a network and a circle of people who happen to be in proximity. One of those proximities is family, right?
Yeah.
So they are stakeholders, and that notion of stakeholder is something that, say, even in dealing with the business groups that I dealt with over the past week, that's something that's almost revolutionary thinking. What do you mean stakeholder?
Yeah.
I have to deal with shareholders, and so that's the most important thing I have to deal with, because business 101 is about, maximizing profits so that the
Shareholder value.
shareholders get their share. And you're going, really? And then when I stand up and say in a group that the purpose of business is not to make profits, the blank look, they look at me. Profits are the consequence of actually doing the right thing. It's not the primary purpose. Okay, it's the outcome.
And we've painted such a bad and grand cible in French, the big target on the back of corporates as being some evil,
Yes,
life sucking entity that is just here
yes,
to take all my money.
yes.
And corporations exist to do innovative, good things in society
Exactly,
that are not
exactly.
capable in community
Yeah,
organizations and
no.
government.
Eh, eh,
And the fact that they're able to earn a profit is just, like you said, a side benefit. And I agree with this, some of my friends on a different part of the political spectrum, that without innovation,
uh,
which does not happen in
uh,
any place but the
no,
corporate sector,
no, no,
without innovation,
no.
you would not have what you enjoy today.
No, I mean, even if we were to bring it to the lowest common denominator, all right, without corporations, without companies, there would be no employment.
No.
Where the hell do you think you're going to work? Are you going to go out to the farm and live out in a cabin somewhere off the grid, which of course then undermines any communitarian understanding of this. Off the
Yeah.
grid means you can't do this anymore. And then what are you going to do? Grow beets and rutabagas? What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
Don't give me this anti-capitalist BS. I mean, folks, take your head out of your proverbial and think in terms of what the consequences are if all of this broke down.
Yeah.
Right? Don't think in terms of greed. Yes, there's greed. Give me a break. There's
There's more greed in the public sector than I've ever found
well,
in the private sector.
let's leave that one off the table for now. There's greed everywhere. All right. So don't just go, looking at large corporations because they're greedy. Let's look at what corporations are capable of doing. But even beyond all that, some of the language that you were using, especially going out to Banff to this conference, the thing that you mentioned that you enjoy about this conference and meeting with people specifically from Alberta is the discussion is on the ground. But that's your
Mhm.
phrase. You use that.
Yeah.
I put down as opposed to in your head.
Yeah.
Okay. We all have great ideas right here. Right. And there's nothing wrong with those great ideas. There's nothing wrong even with the bad ideas. The fact that we have ideas is good enough. And it's only good enough. It's not perfect, but good enough. But to be able to sit down with a group of people who are grounded, right? Grounded in the reality. What I love about my cattle people is their vision, their understanding of themselves. And I always use them as an example. And I'm an urban person. You're not going to get me to sit on a horse to go traipsing through the foothills of the Rockies. Ain't going to happen. All right. I mean, you need a crane to get me on the damn thing to begin with. I have enough trouble getting into cars. But it's how they identify themselves. They are not cattle ranchers. They are land managers. And I went,
Yeah.
first time I heard that, it's just like, excuse me, explain yourself. Cattle and beef are the output, much like any factory. All right. But if we don't have the platform on which to have grass fed cattle, the output is irrelevant.
Yep.
So the real issue is, how do we maintain the prairie grass so that the cattle have something to eat without destroying the land? Hence, the movement of the herd from place to place is the production capability, if you want to use manufacturing
Yeah.
language. And what that immediately said to me is, these are people who are literally grounded. It's the earth,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the land that's important. Now, for the oil and gas industry, I don't even want to talk about it. That's different. But for the people of Alberta that I have met, and that I have great admiration for, it's the people who have that dirt under their fingernails. And I mean dirt. I don't mean grease. Right. And they blow me away in
Yeah.
terms of, the city boy who sits there with all my assumptions about what that means. Oh, you're just a bunch of cowboys. No, you're people who have more heart than I potentially have, especially when it comes to growing things like grass, where I have difficulty keeping a plant alive in my apartment.
Yeah. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, which says more about me when it comes to non-sentient living things. Although, if we were good Buddhists, I would be told they are sentient. So let's go away from that one there. The other theme that I picked up from what we were discussing is the difference between with you and for you.
Yep.
And whoa, I never thought about that. Yes, I know this is about preparedness, but it's more than that. It's about how we live. Do we actually live with people, or do we live for people? And do they live for us? Do systems exist because we need them, because they have to substitute for anything that we need, that I could potentially do on my own? And that actually is what the core issue is. Here in Ontario, here in government especially, and our relationship to government, it's all about, what can you do for me?
Yeah.
So we get into a dependency. That's what you were talking about.
And the argument on the dependency is not to look down at the individuals who are now dependent. I argue it's a function of how we've changed society from where you built your home, you planted your food, you got your water. And oh, by the way, those were some of the most connected,
Yeah.
culturally strong societies around. And as we more and more developed these support systems, they're so complex that they cannot be provided by individuals for themselves.
No.
They cannot be provided by community organizations to themselves. They require a formal setting and a formal institutional
Mhm.
agency to do that. And slowly but surely and methodically over, I argue, from the silent generation right up to Gen Alpha and Gen Z, that we're now looking at a world where our residents and our fellow colleagues, you and I, are not capable of providing for
No,
ourselves.
no,
We
okay.
cannot take care of
No,
ourselves. We
no.
require these
Yep.
external systems to not only
Yep.
exist, but function very well. But
Yep.
what has been lost, and the difference was as we made this transformation over 100 years, the skill sets that were the redundancy in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s are no longer present in the modern society. There's no redundancy for food, water, and housing production with the current population.
No,
Transportation, you can name any one of the critical infrastructure sectors that we now rely upon. And so we've lost the redundancy. And it's not an argument that the modern society is evil, bad, distrustful. It's a blessing. It's brilliant. It's wonderful. It's connected everybody. It's that we've defaulted to that and not kept a redundancy available. So when there is a break, and I argued this one point on the podcast episode that I did this morning as well, was simply that if you think about it professed in the pandemic, when we had a breakdown in society due to an exogenous shock beyond our control, a significant portion of the society had nothing. They had no personal reaction. They had no plan. They had no redundancy. They just sat on the couch and simply waited for the world to return back to normal. And then after a period of time when it looked very much like it wouldn't, they required the intervention of of various levels of government around the world to help people manage through the disruption. There was absolutely not zero, but near zero people who were able to navigate that situation on their own internal resources. And I don't mean thousands and thousands of dollars in the bank.
no,
I
no.
mean, when I looked at, if you got laid off at the beginning of the pandemic, the vast majority of the population simply waited until your job reopened.
Yeah.
How many industrial people, and some did and did very well, realized, okay, a couple of weeks in, this is not changing anytime new. I'm going to swing over here and I'm going to start earning income in a different way, in a
Mhm,
different field, in a different job, in a different trade, because
mhm.
what I do now may not be coming back soon. That's not what happened. That's what would have happened had the culture of redundancy existed in the population.
Yeah,
But my argument is, since it's gone away, what people did is they sat and they waited because they had, call it, no plan B.
yeah,
They had nothing. They had
yeah,
absolutely nothing
yeah,
and
yeah,
needed something external to them
yeah,
to take care of them until their old world could resurrect.
yeah. Interesting, thinking about it from a historic point of view. What emerged with the Industrial Revolution was the beginning of expertise. There were certain things that required experts to do things because it took it out of the hands of the general populace.
Yeah.
All right. So you didn't need to sew clothing anymore or weave a cloth anymore. A machine did it. Now, some would say that actually is a universal approach and it's probably better and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what it did was to take the skill set of just making cloth, going from that cotton field to cotton cloth and industrialized it. So there was no need for the individual to have skills anymore. All right, the blacksmith wasn't needed anymore. The whatever wasn't needed anymore. And so we had emerging as part of the Industrial Revolution, the mechanized expertise based on volume need. Ah, ah, ah. Why? Because the individual can only make so much in order to meet demand. Demand was also much narrower. All of a sudden, we got into an economic mode where demand was market driven and the market was much, much bigger.
Yep.
It goes from something, and I am old enough to know this, it goes from when I was growing up in New York City, Long Island was known as a truck farm. There were truck farms in Long Island. You go, what the hell is a truck farm? That's where the vegetables were grown to feed the people who lived in the city.
Yeah.
And they were trucked in on a regular schedule. Right? As the city grew, the truck farms could not, because they were smaller, they were run by families, they could not keep up with the demand. So now we got into agribusiness. Not that quickly, but over time.
Over time, yeah, industrial agriculture production.
And now it's an industrialization of agriculture. What happened to the truck farms? Well, they
Yeah.
become the suburbs. And they became property. They were sold. You still get that in cities like Canada and Ottawa. You still get that here in Ontario, the rest of Ontario, where there's a big fight against the developers going into the Niagara Peninsula, taking over all of the farmland in order to build complexes, housing.
Yep.
You say, do we really need that much housing? Well, yeah, we do. Maybe we don't. Who knows? But what is the consequence of no longer being able to grow our own fruit? Well, that means our fruit now comes from overseas.
Yeah.
Look at the connectivity here. As one domino moves and falls, a series of other dominoes fall, and as demand grows, large becomes the normative, right?
Yep.
And it becomes, but expertise at the same time is lost along the way. And you look at it in almost any field. There was a time when there was the doctor. They still exist. But then there's the surgeon, and the surgeon is not just the doctor, and the doctor isn't someone who does surgery. Ooh, now we're moving down a road of expertise within the medical profession. Then there's the brain surgeon, who's not just a surgeon, but is a specialist in the field of surgery.
Yep.
Not every surgeon does brain surgery or heart surgery, or you name the limb. Okay.
Yep.
And then you go, well, we actually have morphed as a society, grown, some would say, as a society, into a society of experts, which then compartmentalizes the social human experience.
Yep.
There are surgeons, there are brain surgeons, right? They're not the same. They're two different compartments, right? And we look at it and we go, how can we how can we develop a communitarian approach that recognizes, admits that responsibility is core to everything that we should do as people living in society, such that preparedness becomes not just something we do in order to deal with tsunamis, because I'm going to be blunt, none of us, neither you nor I, most of the people listening to us, is ever going to face a tsunami.
No.
Right? It ain't going to happen. Earthquakes maybe, but that's a different issue. Preparedness is not just simply about extreme exogenous situations. Not just. It isn't about that, fires and otherwise, but it's also about how do we actually take care of ourselves without being dependent on systems in order to take care of us.
No, it's absolutely true. And I've always, in the way I've phrased it in some of the writings and presentations that I've done, is preparedness is being, and part of the reason why it's difficult for the population to understand and accept it is that right now it's all framed in dire danger and death.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
communicated in that way. You need to be prepared or you will perish, or you will be harmed, or you will be in trouble, or you will not be able to take care of your family, etc. When in fact, preparedness is very much like an insurance program that you
Yep.
purchase. You buy
Yep.
an insurance plan to mitigate against a future risk of a
Yep.
probable but not certain event.
Right.
And we do the same thing in preparedness. Now, it's reason why I'm a 53-year-old man. I should be in the gym a couple of times a week. Not a lot, 2 times a week, lifting heavy weights, because that is a preparedness plan to mitigate against future health issues, right? That's prepared.
Hmm.
I need to be prepared for economic shocks just as much as I need for natural hazards being realized.
Yep. Yep.
I argue convincingly, I hope, that the loss of your primary source of income tomorrow is just as impactful, if not more, as your house burning down.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And very few people, and we're in a bit of an economic quandary right now, largely because everybody's in a bit of stasis now as we wait to see what happens south of the border. But when we look at the economic picture you're in, most of the people out there will earn an income, which means
Yes.
they trade time for money and services. As you said, their niche, their little service,
Hmm.
their little
Hmm.
expertise, they trade it for money.
Hmm.
Most of it is at will employment.
Yeah.
You will lose your job. You and I will lose our jobs. We'll
Yeah.
either die, quit, fire, retire, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
one of us will lose our job. And the pandemic, as I said before, was a perfect example of how very
Yeah.
few people were absolutely ready and had a
Yeah.
strategy in
Yeah.
place for when they get fired. I use getting fired as the opening door to educate people that preparedness moves far beyond that, what you think of disasters and kits and flashlights
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
non-perishable water.
Yes.
That I use that idea of what the trifecta of preparedness plans, the third one being you're fired,
Hmm.
as I call it, as the door opening where we move the conversation
Yeah.
away from existing calamities that we're so familiar with into the world of this is your life.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
the efforts that you undertake to keep a positive mental
Yeah.
health
Yeah.
is just as much about preparedness as anything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because when the balloon goes up, and you don't know when that is, none of us do, when you're faced with a crisis, starting it out of shape, stressed to the nines, and broke is not a recipe for success.
No.
Which
No.
is why when I speak about preparedness, I always start with the individual. So before we're going to talk about disasters and getting fired and everything,
Yeah.
how's
Yeah.
your physical, mental, and physical
Yeah.
health?
Yeah.
Or sorry, how's your physical, mental, and financial health?
Yeah.
How are those three doing? Are you happy? Are
Yeah.
you robust? Are you capable? Let's square away that, because that makes you far more capable and ready to deal with those things that you cannot, the rapid onset events
Yeah.
can
Y-
happen.
Yeah.
That's a measure of preparedness. And when you start the discussion there and you don't start it at when the power goes out and there's a
Yes.
flood in your
Yeah.
neighborhood,
Yes.
the
Yes.
conversation starts. And
Yeah.
this is why I say
Yeah.
I've written before about many of the reasons why preparedness is so difficult to get people to adopt, is that the first part of it is you frame it in death and destruction from the
No.
get-go. What do you
Yeah.
want people to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're not going to say, "Oh, yay, let's talk about my building burning down or a flood."
Yeah, yeah, and the likelihood of that happening in our own way of thinking
Oh, yeah.
immediately permits us erroneously
Yep.
to dismiss it. Oh,
Yep.
the possibility of this building burning down is nil. All right, and I think, etc. What's interesting, first of all, a story from this past week. One of the participants lives in Barrie with his wife and 8,000 children. I think he's got 4 kids. And he came
Oh,
back, he came back, I think it was 2 days ago. He said, well, we had a blackout. Oh, and he thought it was the best thing my wife and I had in a long time. I said, what? Definitely you live in a small town.
yeah,
You do that in Toronto and everybody goes, where's the elevator and how the hell do I get out of here?
yeah. Yeah.
But he said, well, the kids went to bed. Actually, they were in bed when it happened. And so we went out onto the veranda in front of the house, just the two of us, and we saw the most spectacular set of stars and the moon and the planets you could possibly. He said it was so beautiful.
Yep. Yep.
And I thought,
Yep.
I agree.
Yep.
And in some instances, that's a disaster, all of the food in the refrigerator is going to melt. Especially in the freezer. What do don't open the freaking door, damn it. That's rule number one. Okay. If you don't open the door, it's going to take at least
Longer.
2 days before it even begins to melt. And if you have electric appliances, well, you're not going to be able to cook anything anyway. But that's a different issue. Dinner was over, blackout went on. It's not going to last for. This is not Ramallah. It's not going to last forever. It's going to come back on. You're in Ontario. Hydro is going to do its bullshit thing, and it's going
Yep.
to come back on. So let's like this is not a disaster, but guess what? It was. It was an opportunity.
Yep.
You go, oh, my wife and I sat outside and watched the stars.
Yep.
We got in contact with the universe. I thought, good for you. So the only thing that scared us were all the animals running around. I mean, we didn't know whether they were raccoons or whatever. He said, actually, we both got scared because a local cat went jumping all over the place, but that's a different issue. And when you think about that, you think, at what point are we comfortable enough in our own life situation to pick up on what you were saying, where something that goes wrong can actually be wrong, quote unquote,
Yeah.
can actually be embraced as an opportunity.
Yeah. And that's so true. We, it's that old philosophical idea. And of course I get my philosophers mixed up, but the greatest threat to man is being left alone with his own thoughts. And very few of us, because we live in a world of many distractions. And again, I'm not going to take away from the modern technologically enabled
No,
society.
no,
It's that a sense of balance probably doesn't exist. A sense
no,
of, and this is again why I love to do canoeing, why I love to be in the backcountry, why I love to paddle, because sometimes you just need to realize that you are a grain of sand on a rock hurtling through the
yes,
universe at
yes,
5,000 miles
yes,
an hour, to
yes,
just
yes,
realize that all these things that you've decided to become stressed and anxious about are
yes,
pretty irrelevant and ridiculous when you think,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
And
Yeah,
that's why I added the stoic piece to my writing this morning to say, like, you know, there's so very little in the world that you are in charge or responsible for, or phrased differently, that you can actually influence. There's
that's
such a
right.
small,
Right.
infinitesimal amount.
That's
What
right.
you do have absolute and unquestioned authority over is
Yes,
how you choose to respond to the world around you.
yes,
So if
yes,
I'm going to put the two of those on a on a balance, I'm going to say personal responsibility means opening that door is likely going to result in a significant reduction in your
yeah,
personal anxiety and stress in your life when you
yes,
sit down and realize, in fact, I don't control most of this.
yeah,
So why am I deciding to
yeah.
get bent out of shape? And as my mother used to say, wrapped around the axle
That's right.
on things that are, you know what? Like you and I both have probably pretty profound opinions on who wins the next American and Canadian elections.
Oh,
I,
I think we have opinions we don't want to share.
right. But you're not wrong. But the thing is the beauty of democracy is I have a say, just not the final say.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Right.
yeah.
That's it.
Oh, yeah. It's not just
Right.
about me.
So if the
No.
wrong party, wrong in air quotes,
Mm,
wins the election, there isn't a failure. The community you've decided to be a member of
hmm.
has chosen this individual to
Yeah,
lead.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the sense of duty to the community.
Yep.
It's like people that go along, well, he's not my prime minister. Well, in fact, dude, yeah, he is.
Yeah,
You may
whether you like it or not, it's totally
individual.
irrelevant.
Nobody
And
cares
it
what
is relevant. Actually, just it's not irrelevant. It is relevant. Okay, live with it.
yeah,
Damn it!
yeah,
What's your problem here? You
right.
know, a lot of what we're talking about is, yeah, and this is what shocks people who come to one of my programs. When I facilitate a leadership program in particular, is I throw the cognitive bias at them, that says uh, control is an illusion,
Yeah.
and you see people going, "Well,
The illusion of
it's
choice.
an illusion. It's an illusion, folks.
Yeah.
You're lying to yourself that you think you can control anything." Right? You're lucky if you can control your bowel movement, depending on whether you've had tacos or not. Okay, let's be straight. Let's get straight here. All right. That's crude, but true. It's real. It's very real. I mean, you just have to make sure that you're not too far away from the throne. It's as simple as that. Go away. But if you think about it, and we think about it, there's the illusion of control.
Yeah.
There's the fiction of being overeducated and totally knowledgeable about absolutely everything. And somebody asked me the other day, so, what's the value of education? And I looked at them. I thought, the value of education is not filling your head with all kinds of crap. The value of education is bringing you to the edge so that you can raise questions.
Yeah.
It's not
Curiosity.
about it's not about knowing everything. If you want to know everything, be Google. Go do
Yeah.
it that way. It's about being able to ask the question so that you can go to Google in order to find something.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
can't ask the question, right? That's hermeneutics 101, to be philosophical. Hermeneutics 101. If you can't ask the question, all right, Socrates would say this, hate to tell you, you ain't going to know the answer. You can't pursue it. And by the way, every question you ask already has a grain of understanding and information and
In
answer
the question.
in the question.
Yes.
Come on, folks. This is
Yeah.
how we actually as humans work. So I find it fascinating where people are stunned by language like this. You're going, illusion, control is an illusion. Knowledge is not filling in all the gaps. Knowledge is actually recognizing that you have more gaps the more you learn, and therefore being more curious.
Well,
But
it's
the other one,
curiosity drives everything.
yeah, but the other is you know, when we use the VUCA acronym, all right, the volatility is that, let's try to get out of that mindset where we think in terms that it's only about, earthquakes. All right, that's not what it's about. When we deal with uncertainty, okay, well, we could be philosophical. We don't know if the sun's going to rise tomorrow. Yeah, okay, fine. Move that out of the way. If we deal with ambiguity, we can actually say, we can think in terms of, well, every answer actually raises more questions. Yeah, okay, fine. That's all nice and philosophical. It's also very real. For me, the core is, how willing are we to embrace complexity as the norm for everyday life?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It's complex, folks, and complexity is not a complication. It's a complexity. A leaf on a tree is complex, which makes it beautiful. All right? Right? Don't be afraid of reality, because reality is more than what you actually can control or know about. And that is how you actually begin, for me, how you begin to go down the road of preparedness.
Yeah, I frame it as the normative versus positive debate. Do you look at the world around you through a lens of how you think it should be and want it to
Right,
be, or do you
right.
look at it through the lens of how it actually is?
Yes, yes,
And complexity is simplicity, and what I mean is simple. Life is not complicated. You have actually
no,
very few choices you can make, and you have very few but profoundly important responsibilities. And people who, I, I had this discussion with a student that I'm their academic supervisor for their master's thesis. And I'm like, you have to make sure, like you said, you ask the right question, because the wrong set of answers to a great set of answers to the wrong question leads you in
yeah,
very, very different directions than you think it will. And
yeah,
that you're driven by the sense of curiosity. And when you
yes,
write in an academic sense, you're contributing to the body of knowledge. You're not answering the body of knowledge. You're
yes,
contributing to it. You're adding to what others have done, and others shall add to what you have done,
yes,
you know? And so we're just living in a world where our curiosity drives questions about things phenomena we don't completely understand,
yep,
and drives us towards some pretty cool outcomes. And this is where innovation goes. Um, I just hope that a lot of the effort that's steered towards anger and wanting to change is turns toward creativity and
yeah,
opportunity. Like one, and I'll end with it, and I'll make this closing remark, is that it's very much like the debate we have in the climate crisis, and that our way out of it is through STEM. It's through innovation, technology, research,
yep,
cutting edge ideas, and curiosity of brilliant minds will work our way through this. However, there's a whole group of body of people who don't want to put their confidence in that.
no,
They don't want to throw their weight behind intelligent minds, which, by the way, have solved every other crisis humanity has faced.
yes, yes. I mean, okay. On that note,
Yeah,
have a great weekend
I shall.
and see you next time.
All right.